Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I find you well. My name is Stuart Louisi. I'm today giving you a presentation on contract law or the law of contract. And today we'll be mostly focusing on the elements of a contract. Let's go to business. What is a contract? A contract can be defined as an agreement between two or more persons or corporations. It creates, this agreement creates obligations as well as rights for each of the parties. If one of the parties to a contract does not meet his or her obligation, the contract is enforceable by the court. So, when we're looking at a contract here, we are saying it's an agreement between one or two people, or it will be maybe between people and organizations. So it's an agreement. People are saying, okay, you do this for me and I do this for you. Now, for us to say there is a contract, the courts always seek to find out, was there a contract between person A and person B? But they've got certain elements. They look into the relationship that has existed between these two parties. These are what we call the elements of a contract. Some normally say the elements of a valid contract. But I wouldn't want to talk of a valid contract and an invalid contract, because it does not make sense. It's either there is a contract or there is no contract. You cannot say a valid contract or an invalid contract. Right. Now I'll be looking at the elements of a contract. You might have heard of 4 elements of a contract, 6 elements of a contract. Today I want to look at the 10 elements of a contract. The first one is what is called offer and acceptance. Mathematically speaking, agreement is equal to offer and acceptance, offer plus acceptance. So when I'm talking of offer and acceptance, I'm talking of agreement. So agreement is the first element of a contract. There must be another party offering something, and the other party to whom the offer has been extended should accept the offer. And the party that has made the offer, we can call that party the offeror. And the party to whom the offer is extended, we may call that party the offeree. So we might therefore define a contract as a situation when the offeror offers an offer to an offeree, and the offeree accepts that particular offer. Tongue twisting. Let's read it. Okay. Before I get to the legal relationship, okay. Let me just perhaps give you the list of all the 10 first, then I go to them one by one. I think that will be easier, right? The 10K up to the 10. Those are our 10 elements that we are going to focus on. The first one, the offer and acceptance. The second one, legal relationship. The third one, considers ad idem. The fourth one, competence of parties, free consent, lawful consideration, lawful object, not declared to be void, certainty and possibility of performance, and legal formalities. So we'll be discussing these 10 elements. Each one of them should be proved to be there for us to say a contract is there. Right. So the first one now, the offer and acceptance. I've already explained on the offer and acceptance and said this is an agreement. In a contract, there must be at least 2 parties, right? One of them making the offer and the other accepting that particular offer. There must thus be an offer by one party and its acceptance by the other. The offer, when accepted, becomes an agreement. That's why we said agreement, suppose we were to be asked to define agreement, we would give it a mathematical definition. Agreement is equal to offer plus acceptance. That will suffice. Let's look at the second element, legal relationship. Okay. When people get into an agreement, there must be the intention by both parties to be legally bound. I'll give you an example. A husband, or let's say a wife, promises her husband that every month she'll be giving the husband $5,000 for self-keep. Okay, this is an agreement. But if we critically look at it, these people, when they enter into this agreement, none of them has got at the back of his or her mind the intention to be legally bound by this agreement. So in other words, this is a social agreement. If the wife fails to give the 5,000 promised to the husband at the end of the month, the husband cannot take the wife to court to say, she did not give me my what? My 5,000. Because both parties, when they entered into this agreement, none of the parties had the intention to be legally bound in the event of someone not fulfilling her part or his part. So, in a legal relationship, the parties to a contract must intend. Intention here is the most important word. They must intend to constitute a legal relationship. It arises when the parties know that if any one of them fails to fulfill his part or a promise, he would be liable for the failure of the contract and can be sued in a court of law. If there is no intention to create this legal relationship, there is no contract between the parties. Agreements of a social or domestic nature which do not contemplate a legal relationship are not contracts at all. For example, if Jane is promised by Peter, let's say James is promised by Peter that on Valentine's Day, Peter is gonna go and spoil Jane at Spare's. And they agree that they will be meeting on 14 February, the hour of 1900. That is 7 p.m. Okay, it's now 14 February. Jane goes there. She looks around at the space. She cannot find what? Peter. She sits, she's getting agitated. She phones Peter. Peter doesn't pick up his phone. She waits there until, okay, because she always got a few dollars, she buys a cool drink, drinks, leaves Spares after about 1.5 hours, and Peter still doesn't show up. She is angry. She has been made to wait and wait for somebody who never came. But she cannot take the matter to a court of law to say, I am suing Peter for keeping me waiting at the space and not showing up. The reason is the courts want to establish whether the two had a contract to meet at the space. And the court will find that no, there was no contract. It was just a social agreement. It was just a promise, because when these people agreed to meet at space, none of them had the intention to sue the other in the event the other one does not show up or pitch up at the space. So there was no legal relationship. In other words, the courts will establish that there was the element of legal intention was missing. And because of that, the contract will say, no, you can't bring that. There was no contract, so we cannot sue anybody here for that. Let's look at the third element, consensus ad idem. Some call it consensus ad idem, whichever the case may be. Sorry. Okay. When it comes to consensus ad idem, we are saying there must be the meeting of the minds. We have said a contract is between two parties, part A and part B. So, when we're talking of the meeting between the two parties, there must be the intention. Let's say we've got here part A versus part B. Okay. Now, these two, when we say they must be the meeting of the minds, what they are thinking of should be the same. Let me give an example. Let's say A owns two cars, a Mazda 626, and he also owns a Toyota Autis, right? Both of these colors are blue in color. Now, B is A's friend. So B always sees A driving this car, the Mazda 626. B thinks A only has got one car. But unknown to B, A has got two cars, a Mazda and a Toyota. But the color is the same. So all along, B thinks that A only has got one car, a Mazda 626. So A approaches B and just tells B, I'm selling my car. And because B thinks that A only owns this Mazda, automatically he concludes that A is selling the Mazda. But the fact of the matter is A is not selling the Mazda. He is selling the Toyota. And when that happens, so these people's minds are not meeting. The other one, when he is saying, I'm selling my car, he is thinking of the Mazda, the one that is when A says he's selling his car, he is thinking of the Toyota, because that's the car that he's selling. But B thinks that he is buying the Mazda. When B hears that A is selling his car, he thinks A is selling the Mazda, because that's the only car that he knows. But A is not selling the Mazda, he's selling what? This Toyota Autis. So these people, yes, the other one wants to buy a car, the other one wants to sell a car, but their minds are not meeting. They are talking of different cars, yet they think they are talking of the same thing. So their minds, we say there is no meeting of the minds. There is lack of consensus ad idem. The parties to an agreement must have this mutual consent. That is, they must agree upon the same thing and in the same sense. This means that there must be consensus ad idem, the meeting of the minds. They must be talking of the same thing. If husband and wife agree, we are going to Swakopmund, okay? Both of them should agree. It shouldn't be the other one is thinking of Hentis Bay, because Hentis Bay is in Swakopmund, then they say these people are what? Are meeting. Their minds are meeting. So I think the example of the Toyota and Mazda will help explain that people may be talking of things that are almost the same, but they are not the same. Both buying of a car and selling of a car, but these are different cars. That is what we mean by consensus ad idem. So what we do is the courts will seek to establish that when these people made the agreement, were they talking of the same thing? The item at the center of the contract, is it the same? If it's not the same, then there is no consensus. Competency of the parties. When we're looking at competence of the parties, we're looking at whether the people who are in agreement are qualified or qualify in terms of the law to be in an agreement. A person who is mentally deranged cannot be competent to enter into a contract. The court will seek to establish, was that person, the people, the parties to the contract, were they in their right faculties in as far as their mental stability is concerned? That's what we mean. You cannot expect kids, people are below the age of majority, which in most countries happens to be 18. to enter into an unassisted contract. The law generally tries to protect minors. So there are certain ages that can enter into a contract, and there are some that are prohibited. Now, so when we're talking of competence of the parties, for us to say this contract is valid, the people who have entered into this agreement, A and B, they should be people who are capable of entering into a contract. And according to law, as a general rule, every person is competent to enter into a contract if the person is of the age of majority, and if the person is of a sound mind, and if the person is not a disqualified or a specified person by law. When we are saying the person is disqualified, the person might have been specified. There are some people who enter into several debts to the extent that they become insolvent, and these people may be declared insolvent. And when a person has been declared insolvent, he cannot be trusted, or she cannot be trusted to enter into any other business contract. And as such, these people are prevented by law to enter into any contract. So, for them to establish whether a contract exists or does not exist, the courts will seek to establish whether the parties to the contract were competent enough to enter into a contract. We have said, as a general rule, a minor is that person who is below the age of majority, legal age of majority. That person is not allowed, as a general rule, to enter into a contract. But that does not mean a minor cannot enter into a contract. A minor can enter into a contract, but this contract may be assisted. It's like the issue of marriage. There is an age of consent. If a person is below the age of 18, one cannot enter into a marriage. A marriage is a contract per se. Right? So you cannot say, I'm going to marry this person, and the person is a minor, unless the person is assisted and is of a reasonable age, let's say 16 to 18. Yes, the person can enter, provided the person's body is big enough for people, any reasonable person, to suspect or to think that the person is an adult. And the law defines a reasonable person as any person who knows his or her destination and knows the correct bus fare. That's a reasonable person. So when we're looking at a minor, some can enter into contracts that are assisted. But the other general rule is these minors should not deliberately enter into a contract knowing very well that they are minors and seeking to hide behind this rule that minors cannot enter into a contract, especially if there is what we call positive enrichment. Some people who are minors, they know they are not allowed to enter into a contract, but they enter into a contract with the tate who lives next door that they will be carried to school every day, and they promise the tate that they will pay for the transportation at the end of the month. This goes on. At the end of the month, they say, no, I'm yet to receive my money, I'll give you. Now, this is no. This person's contract will be regarded valid because there was positive enrichment, because the minor benefited from this arrangement and made the other one to believe that all was in order. So we need to be clear on that. A person of unsound mind, that's why these are what I refer to as people who are mad or insane, the mentally deranged, cannot enter into a sound contract. And a person expressly declared disqualified or specified at law cannot enter into a contract. So the courts will need to establish all these facts to say, yes, these people were competent to enter into a contract. So if you'll see where we are coming from, we said the first one, our first element was agreement. There must be one party making an offer and the other party accepting the offer. And this acceptance, the offer first should be communicated to the offeree, and the offeror should make sure that she gets the acceptance by the other party. And the second one was legal intention. We said these parties who have made offers and accepted each other's offers, they must be having the legal intention to enter into a binding contract and to be addressed by courts of law in the event of one of the parties failing to discharge his or her mandate. And the third one, we said it was the existence of what we called consensus ad idem, the meeting of the minds. And the fourth one now was saying the parties involved must be competent enough to enter into a contract. Let's look at the fourth element of a contract. Free consent. Free consent. Right. When we're talking of free consent, we're saying the acceptance that is made by the offeree, remember the offeree, the person to whom the offer has been made by the offeror. Now we're saying there must be free consent. You cannot force somebody to say, make me an offer on that thing. And the person out of fear makes an offer and you accept. There's no free consent there. It's coerced. You cannot say, I'll give an example. Let me give you an example. We look at the doctor-patient relationship at Windhoek Central Hospital there. And the patient is a rich somebody with several plots or properties in Windhoek. But is suffering from a serious ailment, which only one doctor is capable of handling. And whilst this person is on a sick bed, the doctor says, for me to do a proper job here or to do this, because your operation is very costly, but I can do it for you if you sell me one of your houses. Remember, the person on the sick bed is trying to live. He needs life. Or she needs life. So this person will say yes in order to be cured. So if the doctor comes with papers and says, okay, before I treat you, let's sign an agreement of sale. That agreement of sale will be thrown out by the courts because we cannot be certain that the patient was not coerced into signing. When I say coerced, was not forced into signing this contract because the other person was on the receiving end. So the consent parties, right? People should have free consent. Both of them must be at the same level. It is for this reason that in the military, especially the British military dogma, you would find that a senior rank, let's say it's a colonel, is not allowed to go and marry a sergeant in the same army. Why? Because people will start wondering, perhaps the senior soldier, the colonel, used his ranks or his seniority in the organization to force the other lady to accept or to consent to a marriage. In this, the practice was all along, if you are a major, you marry a major. If you are a captain, you marry a captain. It was for the same reasons. Because we cannot expect in a relationship where the father of the house ends up going out, right, dating a housemaid, cheating with a housemaid. Do you think there is fairness there? Or the mother of the house ends up cheating, right, with the garden boy? There is some gradients here in favor of the landlord, because the garden boy would know that if he says no, that might be the end of the job. If she's the housemaid will also know that if I don't consent to the advances of the father of the house, I may end up losing my job. So there is that speculation. The courts will think along those lines. Perhaps this one was forced into saying yes when the person didn't want to. So we are saying, where such in business, where the other part that is perceived to not to have consented freely, then there is no contract. Both parties must be at equal footing, at the same level, and free to say yes or no. Then, yes, we say there is a what? There is a contract. Misrepresentation, it's another factor that affects the element of free consent. You might misrepresent. If you don't do this, there's going to be disaster. So the other person will now accept because of the misrepresentation. Fraud, undue influence, and mistake. Some people who accept the offer based on a mistake made. Or because in the case of the Mazda, our example of the Mazda Toyota transaction, one, by mistake or misrepresentation, one may what? May end up in a contract. For example, by misrepresentation, or somebody selling a house in Eros, the reason why he is selling this house is because there is a problem with termites. He has tried to fight that problem and it's a problem. Then decides to get rid of this house, selling it. And the other person who asks, is there any special reason why you have decided to sell this reason? The person will just say, no, I just have got too many, perhaps I'm just relocating to Tumen. So I don't need a house in Windhoek anymore. And it does not disclose the fact that I want to sell this house because of the problem of termites. And after selling this house, you might find the same person again using the money to go and buy another house in Klein Windhoek, the same Windhoek. That's a misrepresentation. And if this can be established by the courts of law, then the contract in courts was never a contract at all. The same goes, some may end up in a contract that are fraudulently influenced. And when this thing happens, there is no contract. Let's look at the sixth element, lawful consideration. When we're looking at lawful consideration, we are saying something for something and nothing for nothing. The two parties concerned must each give something to the other, and this something should be of the same value or almost the same value. That is lawful consideration. Something for something. I give you something, you give me something. If you employ somebody to work in your garden, the person is giving you a service. Attending to the garden, doing the digging, whatever, watering, that is required. And at the end of the day, you must pay the agreed price. That's lawful consideration. Something for something, nothing for nothing. You might have a situation where somebody just comes to you and says, you know what, I'm selling a laptop. This laptop costs 20,000. You know it very well, and you want to buy it. And the person says, if you can just give me $500, I'll give you this. Then you ask yourself, are you sure it's yours? The person says, yes, I can prove it. Here are the receipts, it's mine. Okay. Then you go ahead and buy that laptop for $100 or for $500. A thing in its new bag, it has never been used, everything is there, and you know very well this costs 20,000 and you buy it for $500. The courts will start asking, is there lawful consideration? Is this what we can call something for something? The $500, is it almost of equal value to the thing that is being offered, which is market selling at 20,000? So, if it turns out that this person comes up and say, I was not in my sober senses, I had a problem A, B, C, D. Sure, the courts are likely to sympathize with that particular person to say, no, seriously speaking, we cannot expect any reasonable person to sell a $20,000 gadget for $500. There is something wrong there. It smells of something. I smell a rat. So, Lawful consideration, it's about giving something in return, something of value. If there is nothing, right, then there is no contract. You can't just get. So that is lawful consideration. Consideration need not to be in cash or in kind. A contract without consideration is a wagering contract or a betting. Besides, the consideration must also be lawful. So, if there is no what? If there is no consideration, an example is given here when you are betting, right? You just say, okay, if I do this, somebody who wins this, who guesses right, I can hide two things in my hands. It's a game now. Whoever gets it right will get what is there. And you just pick the right side, right? And you find there is a check for what? $10,000. Yes, you get it. But you have not given anything of value here. It was betting. But you got value in return. But the person who was doing it like a betting process. It was a game. That way, yes, the courts may say, there was a contract, because I had a serious intention when I said, whoever gets it right will get it. So, in that case, it's an exception. We'll say the contract existed. Lawful objects. When you look at lawful objects, there are certain objects that cannot be sold. When we talk of lawful object, we are looking at what is called the max. The max is the item at the center of the transaction that results in the contract. If somebody is selling marijuana or cocaine, we know that possession of cocaine is unlawful. It's a crime. And somebody is selling cocaine. So the object here is unlawful. So you cannot say, I have signed an agreement that I'm going to sell 10,000 kilos or 1,000 kilos of cocaine to you, so I need my money. This is unlawful. You cannot even approach the courts, because the courts do not entertain those people who approach the courts with dirty hands or soiled hands. So, if the object at the center of the contract is unlawful, then you cannot what? Enter into such a contract. An agreement may become a valid contract only if it is for a lawful consideration and lawful object. The consideration should be lawful and the object should be lawful as well. You cannot go out at night for the purposes of prostitution. Then you get a client in the streets of Vindu. Then you agree to go and spend some nice time together at a lodge. And you agree, after spending the night together, I'll need so much money. But you don't get the money. If the other client, one of the parties, fails to deliver, to pay the money agreed amount, you cannot approach the courts. One, the element of legal intention is missing here. Yes, there was offer and acceptance. Yes, it was there. Law of intention to be legally bound, it's not there. That's where the problem begins. Because none of these people had the intention to be legally bound. Because they knew very well that the object at the center of the contract was unlawful. And because of that, these people cannot even approach the courts of law because prostitution is not legal. Yes, it's different. In countries where prostitution is legal, then it can be a contract. It can be entertained in courts of law. But in the case of Namibia, in the case of most of the countries in Africa, you won't do that. The following considerations and objects are not lawful. If the item at the center of the contract is something that is forbidden by law. You cannot enter into a contract and sign a contract that you have assigned me, contracted me to go and murder your husband. Yes, you might have signed it down on paper, but it's not a contract because murder, it's an offense, it's a crime. So it's not a lawful object. It cannot be a contract. Some contracts are prohibited by law. A country might have a law that says, thou shalt not buy state land. It might say all the land in the country are state land. Then if you go and sell that land to another person, let's say it's a farm, that will not be recognized because the laws prohibit the selling of state land. All land belongs to the state. If it is fraudulent, fraud does not result in a binding law. So whatever forms the sender of a contract that was fraudulently entered into renders that contract invalid. That is, if it was a contract at all. If it damages somebody's person or property, this is the example of a what? Of you being contracted to murder somebody. You are damaging somebody. Or I hire you to go and destroy another person's house or to set it on fire as well. You cannot say it's a contract. Now that I've set that house ablaze, can you give me my money? If the person refuses, you cannot go to court because if you approach the courts, you will also be arrested. So it's an unlawful object. So the courts will seek to establish that for us to say the contract existed with these two people, was there a lawful object? Right? I wrote there, if it is in the opinion of court that immoral or against public policy, that thing cannot be what? A lawful object. If the courts regard or see the item at the center of the contract as an immoral thing or something against public policy, then the contract ceases to exist. Let's go to element 8, the 8th element. Agreement not expressly declared void. Right. A contract should not be an agreement which has been expressly declared void by any law in the country, as it would not be enforceable. I'll go back to my example of state land. If there is a law that if you are a foreigner, you cannot go and buy a house that is in the low incomes bracket, and somebody in the low incomes bracket, say in Katutura there, sells to you a house in Katutura, yet the laws of the country prohibit that, and they've expressly made such transaction void, then you cannot say, I need that house because we have got a contract. That contract is invalid. We say it's a valid ab initio or a void from the word go, because the laws of the country prohibit you or as a foreigner to go and buy land that is reserved for the locals. Agreements made under a mutual mistake of fact. The law says if an agreement is based on a mutual mistake of fact, like the Mazda Toyota Altis example, then there is no agreement at all. Agreements with unlawful consideration or object, like the consideration is murder, one murders for you, then you pay the person, or selling of cocaine, from where to go, because those are illegalities that are not entertained by the courts. Therefore, according to the law, you cannot form a contract around that. Certainty and the possibility of performance. When you are talking of certainty and possibility of performance, we are looking at the clauses in the contract should be clear to the extent that they don't disturb, they don't confuse, they mustn't be ambiguity, they must be clear and straightforward. You cannot engage somebody and say, let's enter into a contract. I want you to dig the garden. To dig you my garden, you dig my garden, you do everything, you spell out what needs to be done. Then if you dig my garden for 3 hours, then I'll buy you a pair of jeans. And you sign that one as a contract. That is an agreement that does not add up to a contract. Why? It's not clear, it's not specific on the pair of jeans. Is it something that I'll just go to Chinatown and buy and say, this is your pair of jeans? It's not certain. What do I mean? I must be clear to say, if you dig A, B, C, D for 3 hours, then I'll go and buy you a good pair of blue jeans or a Levi pair of blue jeans or a polo pair of blue jeans. It must be clear. That's what we mean by certainty. In other words, the agreement should be clearly worded. No one should be left out guessing. People should understand everything that is around the contract. Then we talk of possibility of performance. You cannot enter into a contract where the outcome is not certain and where performance may not be possible. For example, there are people who say, okay, instead of you hiring contracting engineers to come and survey the land in your farm for a spot where you can sink a borehole, we don't need to do that. Contract me. I'll just go and get a stick, right? You know, there are some people who do those things. A stick, right? When I move with this stick, when it tilts down, it means there is water here, then you can dig. When that happens and there is no water, you cannot sue that particular person because he made you. Seriously speaking, do you think a person who is not qualified to do that will just use this, is it a miracle, and tell you that there is water here? And the courts will not entertain those things, that it was not possible. There was one gentleman, I will not mention but in Vinduk, one professor who was cheated by a person who claimed to be a Sangoma and was told, my brother, if you come with $10,000 to me and we go Nicodemously, that is at night, in the dead of the night, to the cemeteries there, if we go there and we bury the money in the graveyard, if you come after 3 days, the money would have multiplied to what? 10 times 3, 30,000. And it happened. I'm not sure of the figures, but it happened. They did it the first time, the money multiplied by 3. Let's say it was 2,000. So after 3 days, the professor went and it was 6,000. Then he was told, you can even increase. The professor tried with what? With 5,000. After 3 days, he came to check where he had buried the money. The money was 15,000. He was happy. Then he went and told to Madam, we are making money. All you need to do is get an amount of money, then you go Nicodemously to the cemetery at Gamams, you go inside the cemetery in the dead of the night, you dig a hole, you bury your money there close to a grave, then after 3 days you come, it will be multiplied by 3. So he went and borrowed the 70,000, came Nicodemously with his people, buried the money. Unknown to him, each time he was burying the money, the people would also follow him at night and see, oh, that's where he has buried the money. When he did the 70,000, the 70,000 was supposed to give back 210 after 3 days, but when he went there, the guy fainted. There was no money, and these churches had disappeared. And you cannot say, because we had a contract, that you multiply money by 3. Is that possible of performance? No one has got the powers to multiply money. That's as far as the laws, the courts are concerned. So you cannot say there is a contract, whether written or what. After all, a contract is not always written. It can be what? Implied. Agreements to form valid contracts must be certain, possible, and they should not be uncertain, vague, or impossible, or ambiguous. An agreement to do something impossible is void ab initio. The last but not least, we look at the legal formalities. When we're looking at the legal formalities, we are saying there are certain types of contracts where it's specified at law that this contract will not be valid until A, B, C, D is done. Hire purchase contracts, they are supposed to be in a written form. You can say, I've got a contract on hire purchase, but it's just oral, not written down. So there are certain types of contracts where the law insists that these should be in writing, right? So that's the 10 elements of a contract, legal formalities being one of them. We started just a rundown. We started with the offer and acceptance, then legal intention, then we go to consideration, then we went to lawful object, then we talked of consensus idem, then legal intention. All those were the elements of a contract. I'll relist them here for you to see. Offer and acceptance, legal relationship, consensus ad idem, competence of parties to contract, free consent, lawful consideration, lawful object not declared to be void, certainty and possibility of performance, and last but not least, legal formalities. I salute you.